St Dominic, the founder of the Dominican order, contemporary of St Francis. Around this time, the early 1200s, the mendicant orders started to flower in the church. Mendicant really meaning, I think, literally begging. Those orders that begged, those orders that lived on donations from the faithful, which included Dominicans and the Franciscans and the Servite order, the Carmelites, the Augustinians, not sure what other orders there were. There were about 5 or 6 mendicant orders, and this was something that was a new thing in the church because there was mostly the monasteries, those who stayed at the monasteries. Now these mendicants were traveling preachers, traveling around. So they were contemplative, they had their friaries or their monasteries, and then they would travel around and preach as well, which was a new thing and a beautiful thing for the church, which was really what Jesus did. You know, St. Francis was really patterning himself after Jesus's life, and St. Dominic too. So St. Dominic came from France. It's not France, Spain, from Spain. And he studied at one of the universities there, and he studied so well. He was such a model of studiousness and holiness, and that his good example was mentioned to the bishop, who wanted him as one of his canons at his cathedral so that he could set a good example for the other canons, and he did. He entered the cathedral chapter at the for the diocese where he was, and he was a great model for them, and actually reformed a lot of the brothers and converted them to a holier life, and was appointed sub-prior and then prior of the cathedral chapter. The next bishop was really friends with him and admired him greatly, and the king of the Castile wanted to marry a woman in France, and asked the bishop to go and talk to the king of France to get his daughter's hand in marriage. So the bishop went and took Dominic along as a companion, and as they were traveling through the southern France, they encountered the heretics, the Albigensians, or the Cathars they call them, and the heresy of Albigensianism, which was kind of like there were two dual gods, a god of evil and god of good. Satan was in control of the material world, and God ran the spiritual world. And they considered the Catholic Church as belonging in some way to Satan, because there's many material things in the Catholic Church. The hierarchy, they rejected everything in the church, the hierarchy and the whole structure of the Catholic Church, and they made their own structure, which would have been basically the same. You still have to have physical leaders running your religion, but anyway, they focused on the spiritual, and they even saw marriage as an evil thing, and they were very abstemious, very mortified in many ways, and so they got a lot of followers for that reason. But they were very heretical. Anyway, Dominic and the bishop were amazed at this spread of this heresy, and they both had in their heart to combat it by preaching. They went to France, and they found out that the woman that was going to marry the king of Castile had died. So they were free, and they both wanted to pursue this idea of preaching to the heretics, and they went to the Holy Father, who liked the idea and encouraged it. So the bishop resigned his episcopacy and started preaching with Dominic. Dominic got many followers and founded his order of preaching. And again, he was contemporary with St. Francis, and the church really needed reform at this time, and to spread out with these active preachers was a real boon to the church. They really spread the love of God and the truth. The Dominican order is all about truth, the intellectual truth of the faith and of God, and really strengthen the church and spreading the truth. Of course, the Franciscan order is very much a companion to the Dominicans, and we became very much of an intellectual order as well. Although St. Francis was not an intellectual and didn't want to be, didn't even want to emphasize learning, but the later Franciscans did. The later Franciscans right after him, you had St. Anthony, who was a great theologian, and very many after him, shortly after him. So it's sort of St. Francis lost control of where his order was going, and he didn't want a big order, and he got a big order. He didn't want to emphasize learning, and that's what we got. So the Franciscan school and the Dominican school were parallel in the University of Paris and many other schools, and throughout the history of the church up to our day, Franciscans and Dominicans are the great, along with the Jesuits, and are the intellects of the church, many doctors of the church in both orders. So we look to St. Dominic as our brother, and the Dominicans as our brothers. We're all here to spread the truth of the Catholic faith, to preach salvation, to preach. Preaching is so important. Preaching the truth is the key thing. The truth of the church, not the truth of, not the opinions of people that like to talk, but the truth of the church from the catechism and from the documents of the church. And that's what the Dominican order very much does, and we do as Franciscans. So we ask St. Dominic today to bless us all with the truth of this understanding of the knowledge and learning of our faith is so important, to know the truth, to live the truth, and not to get caught up in fantasy or fluffy things or private revelations even, but the solid truth of the faith